Resourceful Designer, episode 74, Overcoming the Afternoon Crash.
Welcome to the Resourceful Designer Podcast, offering solutions to streamline your graphic and web design business so you can get back to designing.
And now, your host. He's finally conceded that his son is a bigger Star Wars geek than he is. Mark DeCote.
Welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm so glad that you've been able to join me today. I've got an interesting topic that usually affects most of us, and that's what happens when we're hard at work throughout the day, and sometime in that afternoon, it just all comes down and we feel the blah, where you just don't want to work anymore. You almost want to go take a nap. It's that afternoon crash. And today I'd like to share a couple of tips on how to try to avoid that crash. But before I get to that, I want to share a special announcement with you today. When I started this podcast almost a year and a half ago, my goal was to create a free resource for like-minded graphic designers, specifically home-based graphic designers or designers who wanted to create a home-based business, whether it's full-time or even just doing a little bit of freelancing on the side. Those were the people I wanted to reach out to, because I figured I had enough experience and enough knowledge with what I've done with my over 25 years experience in the business and 11 years working for myself. I thought I had something to share. Now, since I've launched, I've received nothing but encouragement from the emails I receive, from the iTunes reviews that I receive, as well as on social media, just the kind words that people send my way saying how much the podcast has helped them, either overall or a one particular episode. And some of the messages I've received were really quite humbling and a lot more than I ever expected when I started this podcast. Now, within the last couple of months, I started receiving a couple of other types of emails, and that was people wanting to thank me for what I've done and asking me for my PayPal address so that they can send me a little bit of money as a thank you for the help that I've given them. So first off, a quick shout out. Thank you very much to Susan, to Chelsea, and to Mohammed for reaching out. And thank you very much for your donation to the podcast. But this got me thinking, because when they sent me these emails, they said they wanted a way to pay me back and didn't know how. So that's why they were asking for my PayPal address, and they sent me a small donation for the podcast. And when I mentioned that to some of my other podcasting friends, they suggested that I set something up in case there's others that want to follow suit. So what I did is I created a Patreon account for Resourceful Designer. Now, if you're not familiar, Patreon is a platform that allows you to support people that are creating. It's mostly for creators, artists, podcasters, video people who do stuff on YouTube and such, or musicians. It's a way for the community to help support them. So with the encouragement of other podcasters that I talked to and mentioned how these people had reached out to me wanting to donate to the podcast in a thank you for helping them, they suggest I create a Patreon account, so I did so. And you can reach it by visiting resourcefuldesigner.com/Patreon, that's Patreon, where you can set up a donation, a monthly donation, as little as $1 a month. So if you think you get some value out of this podcast, if you've been enjoying it, if you've been learning from it, if you've been benefiting from it, and if you feel it's worth something, then you can give back via this Patreon account for as little as $1 a month, less than the cost of a cup of coffee. So you can even imagine that you're buying me a drink. I don't drink coffee, but say it's a hot chocolate. You're buying me a hot chocolate. That's what you would be doing every month as a thank you for this podcast. And whatever money I raise through Patreon will help support this podcast, because this podcast does cost me about $200 a month to produce through audio hosting, website hosting, and my editor for editing the audio. It cost me about $200 a month to put out this podcast. So whatever money I raise through Patreon will help alleviate some of that cost as I continue to put out this free content. So once again, thank you to Susan, to Chelsea, and to Mohammed for getting the ball rolling by contacting me and asking me how you can give back And thank you very much for what you sent via PayPal. But I think Patreon is an easier way for both you and I if this is something you're interested in. And if you visit the Patreon page, you will also see that I did put out a few little perks for anybody who does support the podcast. So if you are interested, please visit resourcefuldesigner.com/Patreon. That's Patreon, where you can support the podcast. Now, because of that announcement, I will not be having a tip or resource of the week this week, but I'm going to get right into this week's topic, and that's overcoming the afternoon crash. Now, you know what I'm talking about. It's that feeling, that crash you feel somewhere around, 3 p.m. You don't know what happened. You were productive all morning. You had a good lunch. You came back fully revigorated and ready to work. But sometime, somewhere mid-afternoon, it hits you. The dreaded afternoon crash. Now, some people say this is caused by, low blood sugar. Some others say it's your body's natural sleep cycle that's trying to get some rest in. Other people blame it on your diet or possibly being mostly inactive during the day, but nobody really knows for sure. Now, although I can't make you suppress those afternoon yawns, I can offer some tips and advice on how to try to avoid the dreaded afternoon crash and remain productive until the end of the workday. So the 4 tips I'm going to share with you today are take short breaks, eat well, get organized, and limit distractions. So tip number 1, take short breaks. Now, you've heard it said that sitting for too long isn't good for you. Well, one of the best suggestions I have for you to alleviate that afternoon crash is for you to incorporate short breaks into your workday and get up and walk around. Now, getting up and walking around will help you clear up your mind so that you can remain focused. And when you return to whatever task you were working on, you'll be more revigorated and you'll have a clearer mind. Not only that, but just getting up from time to time and not always sitting down is good for your long-term health. Now, just like your body gets tired and needs rest to recuperate, your brain needs the same thing. It gets tired as well. And all it takes is a couple of minutes of getting up and walking around, and you'll be surprised at how much better you'll feel. Now, if you're like me and you have a dog, these afternoon breaks are a great time to take a quick walk around the block, or even just taking a few minutes in the backyard, throwing around a stick or a ball or a toy or something. Not only will your body and your mind appreciate it, but your 4-legged friend will appreciate it as well. Now, if you don't have a dog, but you've always wanted one, here's your excuse. You can tell your significant other or whoever that a dog will help you stay more productive throughout the day. It's true. It's the perfect excuse to get your new furry friend if you really want one. Now, tip number 2 I have is eat well. Now, one of the perks of being a home-based graphic designer is that we have the entire kitchen at our disposal when it comes to snack and mealtime. Now, one of the cons of being a home-based designer is that we have the entire kitchen at our disposal when it comes to snack and mealtime. What you choose to eat during the day plays a big part in how productive you'll remain throughout the day. Having the whole kitchen at your disposal makes it very easy to grab the wrong things when you're in that creative groove. You know, you're working on a project and you don't want to really get up and stop it or anything. And it's a lot easier to just go grab a couple of cookies and get right back to work than it is to stop and peel and cut up a carrot or something healthy. Not to mention when you take a break for lunch, last night's leftovers do make a great lunch, providing you eat a lunch-size portion. If you pack on your lunch plate like it's dinner time, you'll only be contributing to that afternoon crash because your body will need to use up energy in order to digest that large meal. I know I'm guilty of this. Oftentimes, I'll make a plate of leftovers that is just as big as the plate I ate the night before for dinner. And really, for lunch, you shouldn't be eating that much. So with moderate proportions of healthy, good-for-you food will help you remain productive when you really need it, and hopefully avoid that afternoon crash. Now, tip number 3 is get organized. Now, every graphic designer has their own way of handling tasks and projects. Now, to learn more about how to do this, listen to episode 66 of the podcast, Tackle Your To-Do List with Tasks and Projects, And you can get that episode by visiting resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 66. Now, keeping your to-do list organized and up to date helps you organize your time and balance your workload. And when you have a balanced workload, it makes it easier to focus on the tasks at hand. Even when your brain starts to feel that afternoon fog coming on, when you feel that crash approaching, all you have to do is turn to your to-do list for it to keep you on track. If you've organized it well, your to-do list will show you exactly what it is you have to do next and will keep you on track. And when your mind gets a little fuddled there and that time approaches and you're not sure what to do, your to-do list will keep you on track and keep you progressing throughout the day and will help you avoid that crash. Now, tip number 4 is limit distractions. In order to work most effectively, you need to limit the amount of distractions around you. It will allow you to remain focused on the task at hand. These tasks, they're so important. Now, studies have proven that anytime someone is distracted, it takes them roughly 15 to 20 minutes to recover. No matter how small the distraction is, the distraction could be something 30 seconds, 1 minute. It takes you a full 15 or 20 minutes. I'm not saying it takes you 15 or 20 minutes to get back into it, but for your mind to be fully enveloped in the tasks you're doing, it can take up to 15 or 20 minutes to refocus your energy back on that thing for every distraction. And every time you are distracted, it's sapping away at your energy and it's contributing more to that afternoon crash. Think about it. If it takes 15 to 20 minutes to recover from a distraction, that's energy your mind and your body is using in order to get back on track. And it has to pull that energy from somewhere. And it's the reservoir that you have within you that is slowly being depleted. And if it gets to the point where it's too low, that's when the crash sets in. Now, when it comes to distractions, email is, of course, the biggest culprit. Now, I did talk a little bit on how to handle email in episode 43, a don't-do list for your graphic design business, which you can get to at resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 43. But emails distract you with every new notification that comes in. So the simple remedy is to turn off your email when you're not using it. You'll notice a big difference in your working habit and your energy. Think of your mind and body like a car driving down the highway. It's a car that just has enough fuel in the tank in order to reach the destination. Now, you're cruising along the highway at a good speed when all of a sudden you come upon another car. That car is a distraction. Now, you decide to pass that car. So you press down on the accelerator, pull into the next lane, and you pass the car. Great, you've passed the car and now you're going to keep on going. But by doing so, by passing that car, you had to rev up your engine, which has used up more fuel. Now, if you do this for every car you come upon or every distraction, all that extra fuel you use up might deplete your tank before you reach the destination. Well, the same goes for distractions while you're working. If you stop what you're doing and check your email every time you hear the new email chime go off, you're going to find it hard to keep your concentration up for the entire day because you're depleting your energy reservoir because of the time it takes, the 15 to 20 minutes time period that it takes to get back on task every time you're distracted. So instead, what you should be doing is setting aside certain times of the day for checking and replying to emails. Now, I always suggest that you don't check emails as soon as you sit down in the morning. Instead, wait an hour or two, get some work done, then check your emails. Once you've checked your emails and replied to whatever you need to, turn your email off and then check it again after lunch. Same thing. Reply to anything that needs to, look at whatever, then shut it off and check it again at the end of the day. That's all you really need. You don't need your email on all the time. Email is not an immediate form of communication. If somebody needs an immediate answer from you, they should be phoning you. I'm sorry, I know there are some people that expect an immediate response from email, but in my opinion, email is something that you reply to at your convenience. And if that's not convenient right now, if it means a few hours or if it means tomorrow morning, then so be it. So don't check your emails as you are notified. Wait for a specific time, or if you don't want to do that, at least wait until you complete your current task. You might know an email came in, but don't feel that pull to go check it out. Just ignore it, finish whatever task you're working on, and when that task is complete, then you can go check your email. Now, another thing, if you want to speed up this whole email thing and allow you to get back to work quicker, categorize your emails so that they're easier to manage and sift through. I'm using my Mac and I use Mac Mail. I have smart mailboxes set up, and I have one that has every email from my client. Every time I get an email from my client, I add it to my rules that says any email from my client gets copied into this mailbox, or not copied. It will display in this smart mailbox. So I can easily, whenever I do check my email, I open up my email program and I could see right away if I have an email from a client, because that smart mailbox will show unread email. I might get a whole bunch of emails in my regular inbox, but if that box from my client says 0 or there's no new messages, I know that the other emails in my inbox I could ignore. They're not important. It's not something pressing from a client. It might be something my wife sent me, or a kid, or a friend, or one of the many email lists I belong to, but that's all stuff that can wait. The only thing that's really pressing is if a client sent something to me. So I make it really easy that I can open up my email program right away. As soon as it launches, I can tell if I have anything from a client. If I do, it tells me exactly how many. I can go in and check them, see if it's anything I have to reply to right away. And if that's not the case, if I don't, or if I do reply, then I could quit the program and I could leave the other stuff, the rest of my inbox, for the end of the day or after lunch or so forth. Limit the distractions in and out quickly. Yes, it might take me 15, 20 minutes to get back into the groove of working, but I don't do this every time I hear an email. It's just whenever I'm done a task at a certain time of the day, I can check. And I know that there's some emails I don't have to worry about right now. I might look at them tomorrow. I might look at them in a couple of days. They're not important. So by categorizing your email into separate mailboxes or using smart mailboxes, I don't know what they're called on Windows or whatever. I just know them in Mail. Using smart mailboxes can really, really help you organize things and makes it really easy to sift through your email the most efficient way and get back to working. Now, going back to the car analogy that I used earlier, instead of passing every car that you come up to, what you could do, like I said, is leave your emails to the end or at a certain period, just like a car. If you wait until there are several cars ahead of you and then you pass them in one swoop, you pull out and you pass 3, 4, 5, 6 cars all at once before pulling back into the lane, you will be making progress, but you will be using less fuel doing so because you only had to accelerate that once to get around those cars. So in the long run, you can probably reach your destination. And in the case of working, it means making it through the afternoon without a crash because you haven't used up all your fuel reserves with every distraction that came your way. Now, I'm talking a lot about email because it's the biggest distraction, but it's not the only one. There's social media. There's just plain internet browsing. I mean, how many times have you looked up something on YouTube, whether it could be work related, maybe you need a tutorial on how to do something specific in Photoshop or Illustrator. You look that up and all of a sudden on the sidebar there, it has all sorts of interesting videos. And what's the harm in clicking on just one more? Well, you know what happens? That one more has a whole new set of interesting videos on the side there. And next thing you know, you've spent an hour or two watching videos where you should have been working. So again, distractions. They take your time, they sap your energy, and the more you let yourself be distracted, the more chances of an afternoon crash will hit you. So those are my 4 tips. Take short breaks throughout the day, especially in the afternoon. Eat well, get organized, because the more you're organized, the less chance of you experiencing that crash, because it happens when you're not sure, your mind is foggy. Well, if you're organized, there's less chance for your mind being foggy. And of course, tip 4, limit the distractions that'll sap your energy throughout the day. Now, I know you all have different working styles, and what works for one person might not work for you. But if you do follow these simple steps, you will find yourself with enough energy to avoid that afternoon crash. And overall, you will be a more productive graphic designer. Now, I would love to know what you do to avoid the afternoon crash. Do you go out and walk the dog like I suggested? You perhaps go run on a treadmill or do a little workout exercise. Maybe you throw in a little bit of yoga or Pilates. Or maybe it's just get up and walk around the house. Whatever your method, I would love to hear from you. Please visit resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 74 and leave a comment telling me how you avoid the afternoon crash. And now, this week's question of the week. And this one comes in from Andrew. And Andrew says, I know you are widely successful, so I'm surprised when I hear you talking about smaller jobs that you take on here and there. Do you take on everything that comes your way, no matter how small? Do you have guidelines about what you will and won't take on? Well, thank you for the question, Andrew. And the short answer is yes, I do take on small jobs. And I do have guidelines about what I will and won't take on. And those guidelines is what allows me to pick and choose small and large jobs. And in all honesty, it's if I think the job is interesting. If I have a really small job to do and it's not something that looks interesting, I'll turn it down. But in some cases, like a few weeks ago, I did that logo for a boat. I had never done a name. It's not really a logo per se, but just the name to go on a boat. That's something in all my 25 plus years of graphic designing, I had never done that before. So I decided to take that on. And that was a small job. I charged the guy, I think it was $100 to do that because it didn't take me long, but it was just something I'd never done before. And it looked like fun. So I took on that work. So the guidelines I have in order to take on work are, first of all, whether whatever the work is and the budget allotted to that work makes sense. I mean, if somebody wants a very intricate website, but they only have $500, then no, thank you. I'm not going to do it. But I have done $500 websites for people before because it wasn't a very intricate site. It was just something maybe just a 1-pager or 2-page websites. And I thought that the organization or the person or whatever, it was somebody I thought I'd want to help out, and the job sounded like fun. So I did it for a small price. I never got into graphic design with the mindset that I was going to make a lot of money. Now, I know there are graphic designers out there that do make a lot of money, but that was never my intention. I got into graphic design because I love designing, and I will take on any project that I think I would enjoy doing. And it doesn't matter if it's small. If a little mom and pop corner store comes by and they want a logo because they want a sign to put out on the front of their building and they don't have a big budget, but I think it'll be an interesting project, I will take it on. Because whether they're big or small, it is money that comes in to help put food on my table, pay my bills, it pays my rent. And, like last week, whenever I mentioned that I had 19 jobs on the go, I'm not going to count to see how many I have this week. I'm not sure if I'm down or up from that. But I had 19 jobs on the go. Well, some of those jobs were very simple, just make a small change here or there that would take me 5-10 minutes. Some of them were several hours, and there's a couple of on there that would probably take me a week or so because they were major websites to do. But I will take on just about any job. And I think that's a sign of as you said, a wildly successful graphic designer. Now, I don't like using that term. I don't think I'm wildly successful. I'm just a graphic designer who loves doing what he does and loves helping people out that need my help. But once again, for me to take it on, it has to be a job that I think will be fun. Because I've turned down small jobs that I didn't think would be fun. I've also turned down very large jobs because it just didn't sound like fun. I turned down a couple of years ago, I turned down an annual report for this big company that would have been a very well-paying job. But the thought of designing and formatting all the information, all the charts, all the text, all the graphs and everything involved in an annual report, I just dreaded doing that. And yes, I could have farmed that out. I could have delegated some of that work to other people. But even just managing and overseeing that was just a job I decided I really didn't want to do. It was a new client. I'd never done anything with them before. And this first project they brought to me, it sounded boring. And I decided not to pursue it. I told them, thank you very much for thinking of me, but I wouldn't be providing them a quote on that job. And it was because it was a job, yes, it would have brought in a lot of money, but the job just didn't sound fun. And I got into this job, as I said, this career, this path, because I love designing. And there's some projects that you work that really don't have a lot of design involved. So I will turn those down. So anyways, I don't know if that answers your question, Andrew. In my opinion, every designer, I hate hearing when designers say, well, I no longer take on a job that's under $5,000 or $1,000 or whatever the case. I will gladly, if somebody comes to me and they have a job that will take an hour's time, then I'll charge them for an hour's worth of work. And yeah, depending on what the job is, I mean, I'm saying there's some jobs that might take an hour, but I'm going to charge them more than my hourly rate because of value-based or project-based pricing. But sometimes there's something that comes my way that's just, yeah, okay, it'll take me an hour. I'll charge you for an hour's work just because the project looks fun and it's something I think I would enjoy working on. So that's the answer to this week's question. Now, if you have a question you would like me to answer in a future episode of the podcast, please visit resourcefuldesigner.com/feedback and submit your question. I would love to answer it. Now, I'd like to share another iTunes review I received, and this one comes in from The Farth from the USA. It says, "Thanks, Mark, for the great podcast. I love how it addresses the business side of design. You have a lot of great info, and I'm enjoying learning about you and your business and how it can apply to my own. Keep up the great work." Well, thank you for that lovely 5-star review. Now, if you would like to leave a review for the podcast, please visit resourcefuldesigner.com/iTunes, and that will redirect you to my iTunes page where you can leave a review for the podcast. I love getting these things in and reading them. So that's it for this week's episode. I hope you enjoy it and get something out of it. And once again, before I go, I want to remind you of the brand new Patreon page I've set up for Resourceful Designer at resourcefuldesigner.com/Patreon, and that's Patreon. And you can visit that if you decide that you want to support the podcast in any way, and you can do so for as little as $1 per month. So thank you very much for tuning in. Next episode will be episode 75. Wow, it's hard to believe. Until then, I am Mark Decote, wishing you all the best with your graphic design business, and as always, reminding you to stay creative.
Thanks for listening to the Resourceful Designer Podcast at resourcefuldesigner.com.